All right, let's jump right in. If you own a home anywhere near Thornton, Colorado, you already know the weather here is, well, it's personal. It's not just small talk, right? It's an actual force to be reckoned with. And today, we're going to break down what all that means for the single most important protector of your home, your roof.
So let me ask you something. What do monster hailstorms, an absolutely relentless sun that's baking you at over 5,000 feet, and, get this, 100-degree temperature swings, what do they all have in common?
Simple, really. They're all trying to get inside your house. Seriously. The weather here isn't just happening around your home, it's actively looking for a way in. And your roof? That's the front line. It's the only thing standing between everything you own and a nonstop assault from Mother Nature.
Which leads us perfectly into our first section here. We're calling it Colorado's War on Roofs. And trust me, that's not an exaggeration. We're not talking about a few gentle spring showers. We're talking about a very specific, very powerful cocktail of threats that puts roofs here under a kind of pressure you just don't see in other places.
And a huge part of the problem comes down to one thing: location, location, location. See, if you live here, you're smack dab in the middle of what meteorologists call the Front Range hail belt. This isn't just a run of bad luck. It's a literal geographic corridor where intense hailstorms aren't a surprise, they're just what happens.
So what kind of arsenal are we talking about here? Well, first up, you've got hail, and I mean baseball-sized hail. Then there's the intense UV exposure from being a mile high, which literally cooks roofing materials. Add in those wild freeze-thaw cycles that make everything expand and contract like crazy, and to top it all off, those non-stop brutal wind gusts. It's a full-on forefront war against your roof 24/7.
And it all starts with this one simple thing: impact. Every single time a hailstone hits, it's like a tiny hammer blow. It creates these little micro fractures, these invisible wounds you can't even see. But here's the thing about those tiny impacts. They add up. Storm after storm, year after year, all that stress builds and builds until those invisible wounds turn into very visible, very real cracks.
And once you have a crack, well, the next step is pretty much inevitable. You get a leak. That's all it takes. One tiny opening is an invitation for water to seep into your attic, ruin your insulation, and end up dripping right onto your ceiling.
Okay, so that's the problem. How do you actually fight back? You have to become a bit of a detective. You've got to know the clues to look for. So in this next section, we're going to go over exactly what to spot before a tiny issue turns into a total disaster.
All right, let's look at some real, tangible evidence you can find yourself. Go look in your gutters. See a bunch of what looks like black sand? Those are the granules, the protective sunscreen for your shingles. If they're in the gutter, they're not on your roof. Or maybe you've noticed the edges of your shingles are starting to curl up. Classic sign of heat damage. And of course the big ones, water stains on your ceiling or straight up missing shingles. Yeah, that's your roof screaming for help. Now this is something a lot of people get wrong. You'd think most leaks would start right in the middle of a shingle, right? Nope. Check this out. The number one culprit by a long shot is failed flashing. That's the metal stuff around your chimney, your pipes, and your vents. Those are the real weak spots on almost every roof, way more than just plain old wind and hail damage.
Okay, enough about the problems. Let's talk solutions. What does it actually take to build a roof that can go toe-to-toe with Colorado weather and win? That's what we're diving into now, the Professional Roofer's Playbook.
And the first, most crucial thing to understand is this: not all shingles are the same, not even close. The standard stuff you might use in, say, California, it just won't survive here. For a truly Colorado-proof roof, you need to be looking for shingles with a Class 4 impact resistance rating. That's basically armor against hail. They also need a wind rating of at least 110 miles per hour. And just as important is what's underneath, a special membrane called an ice and water shield that acts as a final waterproof line of defense.
But listen, having the best materials in the world doesn't mean a thing if they're not installed correctly. The how is just as critical as the what. The building codes here are super strict for a good reason. For example, the way the nails are placed is the only thing that guarantees that high wind rating. The valleys where two roof planes meet need extra wide metal flashing. And your attic ventilation has to be perfectly balanced to stop ice from building up in the winter. All of this, by the way, has to be done with permits and pass a final inspection. So, you think you might need a new roof? That can sound pretty overwhelming, I know, but it's not as chaotic as you might think. Let's walk through the repair and replace process from that first phone call all the way to the final sign-off.
Any good project really breaks down into 4 main stages. First, a pro comes out and does a really detailed inspection, taking pictures and documenting everything. Step 2 is getting that detailed estimate and, importantly, working with your insurance company. Step 3 is the big one, the actual installation. And finally, Step 4, it's not over until the cleanup is perfect and you've got that warranty paperwork.
So, what's the timeline look like? A full roof replacement isn't a one-day job. Once the permits are sorted out, you're usually looking at a few days of work on site. There's the tear-off of the old roof, then the installation of the new system, which can take a couple days on its own. The last day is usually reserved for a really thorough cleanup and that final city inspection.
All right, let's talk about the elephant in the room, the cost. A new roof is a major investment, there's no way around it. So it's really important to understand where that money goes and what you're actually getting for it. If you look at where the cost comes from, it might surprise you. The biggest slice of the pie, about 60%, is for the skilled labor. You're paying for the expertise of the crew that knows how to do this right and safely. The actual materials are the next biggest chunk, and that last little bit covers things you might not expect, like if they discover and have to replace any rotted wood underneath your old shingles.
So what's the bottom line? In this area, for a pretty typical 2,000 square foot house, you can generally expect a full roof replacement to be somewhere in the $8,000 to $20,000 range. Now that's a big range, I know. The final price really depends on what kind of materials you pick, how steep or complex your roof is, and what they find once they tear the old one off.
But at the end of the day, it's important to remember what a roof really is. It's more than just shingles and wood. It's the shield that protects literally everything you own and everyone you love, from everything trying to get in.
And that really just leaves one last question for you to think about. The next storm is always just around the corner here. So, is your shield ready?